I am 101 years old, and I own almost nothing. Not because I am poor, because I finally understand what peace costs. And the price of peace is subtraction, not addition, subtraction. I spent 70 years of my life collecting things, collecting grudges, collecting responsibilities that were never mine, collecting opinions about how other people should live. And all that collecting didn't make me rich. It made me exhausted. I looked like a woman who had it all: nice house, good children, church on Sundays, a freezer full of casseroles. But inside I was a storage unit, packed floor to ceiling with things I couldn't name and didn't need and couldn't put down. So today I am going to tell you 4 things you need to throw away if you want any peace after 65. Not furniture, not clothes, although you should probably throw those away too. I am talking about the invisible things, the ones you've been carrying so long you've forgotten they're heavy. Look at that shadow. It is carrying things the woman herself can't even see anymore. That was me, walking through my life with a shadow heavier than my body, and I didn't know it until I started setting things down. If you are over 65 and you feel heavy, if you wake up tired even though you slept, if your chest feels tight and you can't explain why, if peace feels like something other people have but you don't, stay with me, because what I am about to tell you might be the reason. I carried all 4 of these things until I was 89 years old before I set them down. And when I did, it was like taking off a coat I'd been wearing in summer for 30 years. I didn't even know I was suffocating until I could finally breathe. I wore that coat my whole life, the weight of other people's needs, the heat of my own anger, the thickness of stories I couldn't stop telling. And when I finally took it off, I stood there shaking, not from cold, from the shock of being light. That first breath after 89 years of carrying, that first breath without the weight was the most beautiful thing I'd ever felt. And I want you to feel it too, before you are 89. Number 1. Throw away the need to be right. I fought with my husband Harold for 53 years. Not about big things, about where we parked the car, about whether the chicken was overcooked, about whose turn it was to call the plumber small, stupid, meaningless hills. And I died on every single one, because being right felt like power. When you spent your whole life being told you are too emotional or too sensitive or you don't understand, being right is the one thing that feels like solid ground. So I gripped it, every argument, every disagreement. I had to win. I had to prove I wasn't wrong. And I won. I won hundreds of arguments. And do you know what? I lost hundreds of evenings, hundreds of moments when Harold and I could have been laughing or holding hands or just sitting in silence together. Gone, traded for the satisfaction of hearing him say, "Fine, you are right." Words that meant nothing, that bought me nothing, that left me alone in my rightness at the kitchen table while he went to his workshop and closed the door. That workshop door. I stared at it more times than I can count, and every time he closed it, I told myself I'd won. But the door was the evidence. The door was the cost. I'd won the argument and lost the evening, every single time. Harold died in 2003, and I'd give every argument I ever won to have one more evening where I said, "You know what? It doesn't matter. Come sit with me. Being right is expensive, and after 65, you can't afford it anymore. The currency is time, and you are running out." Next time you feel the argument rising, ask yourself one question. Do I want to be right, or do I want to be close? Because after 65, you rarely get both. Number 2, throw away other people's expectations. Every last one. I spent my 60s doing things I hated because I was supposed to. I hosted Thanksgiving for 23 people every year because that is what the family expected. I joined the church committee because Eleanor Fisk asked me and I didn't know how to say no. I visited my sister-in-law every Sunday, even though she spent the entire visit criticizing my parenting. 23 people every November. For 23 years, I cooked for 3 days straight. I cleaned for 2 days after, and not once, not one single time, did anyone ask me if I wanted to do it. They just assumed, and I just showed up, because that is what was expected of me. I did all of it smiling, performing, being Elena the good wife, Elena the reliable one, Elena who never says no, and underneath that performance I was furious. Furious at everyone for asking, and furious at myself for never saying the one word that would have set me free. Number, that is the word number 2. Letters 1 syllable. And it took me until I was 74 to learn how to say it. My daughter Margaret called one October and said the family expected me to host Thanksgiving again. I said, I am not doing it this year. Silence on the phone. You could hear the shock through the receiver. Margaret said, but you always do it. And I said, that is exactly why I am stopping. That Thanksgiving I sat in my own kitchen, alone, with a bowl of soup and a bread roll, and it was the most peaceful meal I'd had in 23 years. Nobody needed anything from me. Nobody was watching. Nobody was keeping score, just me and the soup and the quiet. And I thought, so this is what freedom tastes like. You are allowed to stop performing. You are allowed to disappoint people. Their expectations are their furniture. Stop carrying it in your house. That is what was always left. Empty chairs and crumbs and my cardigan draped over the back of a chair because I'd been too busy serving to sit down. That woman deserved better, and she didn't know it yet. And I'll tell you a secret. When I stopped hosting, the family survived. Margaret did it, and she did it differently. And nobody died. The world didn't end because Elena sat one out. It turns out the world keeps spinning even when you stop holding it, but this next one is the heaviest, and it might be the one you are least ready to hear. Number 3. Throw away the story you tell yourself about who hurt you. I am not telling you to forget. I am not telling you to forgive. I am telling you to set the story down. The one you've rehearsed 1,000 times, the one where you are the victim and they're the villain and justice was never served. I know that story. I lived inside it for 30 years. My mother was a cold woman. I don't say that with cruelty, I say it as fact. She never told me she loved me, not once. She criticized my cooking, my marriage, my body, my choices. She died in 1981, and the last thing she said to me was about the hem of my dress being crooked, a crooked hem. That was it. The last thing my mother ever said to me. Not, I love you. Not, I am proud of you. A crooked hem. And I carried those words for 30 years like they were a diagnosis. And for 30 years after she died, I carried that story like a stone in my pocket. I told it at dinner parties. I told it to my therapist. I told it to my therapist. I told it to myself every time I felt unworthy. My mother never loved me. It explained everything. It justified everything. And it poisoned everything. Because the story didn't just explain my pain. It became my identity. I was the woman whose mother didn't love her. And as long as I was that woman, I could never be anything else. I couldn't see myself whole. The crack in that mirror was my mother's voice. And every time I looked at my reflection, I saw myself in 2 pieces. The woman I was and the woman my mother said I was, and I couldn't tell which one was real. I set it down at 89. Not forgiveness, not forgetting, just putting the stone on the table and deciding I didn't need to carry it into every room of my life anymore. My mother was cold. That is her story. It doesn't have to be mine. Whatever your story is, whoever hurt you, you are allowed to put it down, not for them, for yourself, because you deserve to walk into a room without that weight. You've carried it long enough, and the person who hurt you probably isn't carrying it at all. The story is only heavy for the one holding it. The person who hurt you left the table a long time ago. They moved on. They're not sitting with this weight, only you are. And you deserve to stand up and walk away from it. And the last one, number 4. Throw away the fear of being alone. I know, I've saved the biggest one for last, because this is the fear underneath all the others. The fear that makes you stay in arguments you should leave. The fear that makes you host Thanksgiving for 23 people you don't even like. The fear that makes you grip old stories because at least they're company. I was terrified of being alone, terrified. When Harold died, I thought it would kill me. Not the grief, the aloneness, the physical fact of being the only heartbeat in the house. And for the first 2 years, it almost did. I filled every hour with noise and people and obligation because silence felt like death's waiting room. I said yes to everything, not because I wanted to go, because I was afraid of what I'd feel if I stayed. Look at that calendar, every day filled. Not because I loved those things, because I was terrified of the blank squares. A blank square meant being alone, and alone meant facing the one person I'd been running from my whole life, myself. And then this, months later, almost empty, and every blank square felt like an acre of land I'd reclaimed. Not emptiness, freedom. Space I chose on purpose instead of space I filled out of fear. But here is what I found on the other side of that fear, and I need you to hear me clearly. Being alone is not the same as being lonely. Loneliness is a feeling. Aloneness is a fact, and facts can be furnished. You can make aloneness beautiful. You can make it warm. You can fill it with books and tea and birdsong, and the sound of your own thoughts finally given room to breathe. This is what alone looks like when you stop being afraid of it. A book, a cup of tea, birds at the window, and the extraordinary luxury of nobody needing anything from you. That is not punishment. That is the reward for 100 years of showing up for everyone else. The fear of being alone made me tolerate things I should never have tolerated. It made me stay in rooms I should have left. It made me say yes when my whole body screamed no. And when I finally faced it, when I sat in the quiet and didn't run, I found something extraordinary waiting for me myself. The woman I'd been too busy and too scared and too burdened to meet. I am 101. I live alone, and my life is more peaceful than it has ever been. Not because nothing is wrong, because I finally threw away everything that was pretending to be right. When you strip it all away, this is what is left: light, space. One photograph that matters, and a path forward that you can finally see because you stopped piling things in the hallway. If something in this touched you, share it. Not for me. For the person in your life who is still carrying things they should have set down years ago. They need to hear this from someone who has been where they are. And I've been there. I lived there for decades. I know every corner of that house. Tell me in the comments, which of the 4 is hardest for you to throw away? The need to be right, other people's expectations, your old story, or the fear of being alone? I want to know, because naming it is the first step to setting it down. The need to be right, other people's expectations, your old story, the fear of being alone. 4 things, 4 weights. And you don't have to set them all down today. Start with one, whichever one is crushing you the most. just one. I am 101. I own almost nothing, and I have never had more. That is not a riddle. That is just what happens when you finally learn the difference between holding on and weighing down. Now go set something down.